Hello, this is Matthew Peterson, Jeremiah Newell, and Donnie Tran talking about the instructional core based on the book Instructional Rounds in Education. We'll start with Jeremiah on his thoughts on Chapter 1, the instructional core.
Yeah, I mean, I found the core to be a really refreshing perspective, having come from schools trying to do this kind of transformational work. It's so easy to get these great ideas in your head, but it doesn't get all the way down to the classroom. And I think that's the primary argument around the instructional core, is that ultimately what matters is what teachers and students do in the presence of content, and that if we're not improving teacher skill or what students understand as engagement or the high quality of the content, then we're actually not doing anything. And so that's one of the things that I love about the sixth principle, which is we learn to do the work by doing the work, not by telling other people to do the work, not by having the work done at the same time in the past. It's something, it's by getting into that. And so, like as a leader in this program, I'm really interested in how is it that we make that happen? How do we build the skills of more people at scale so that they can have this kind of descriptive and analytical, then evaluative process in the teaching and learning space, rather than saying, well, what is good instruction? Give me a rubric and I'll go look for it and pass bys, right? It's a very different way of thinking about it. And so I think there's a lot of value to that perspective, but it requires a new set of skills at scale that it's hard, I think, to learn in a book.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremiah, so much of what you said really resonates and makes a lot of sense to me. I guess the overall picture, or the sort of theme that I see when I look at the instructional core and the 7 principles, is that these are all ways of seeing and describing reality. Mm-hmm. Not the perception of reality, not what we think is happening, what we think should be happening, but lets you have a framework for uncovering the truth of what's happening in a given situation.
Without judgment.
Without judgment.
That's right.
But that something is occurring, and and in order for something to work, it must involve the student, the teacher, the interaction between them, and what they are being asked to do, and the thing that they're supposed to be learning, which is the content. Mm-hmm. And I like the framing around the task being at the center of it, and that the task is and not the perception of what the task should be or what students should be doing,
right.
Which I think is really comes up so many times in this reading, that the task as it is, what the student is truly doing
at that moment,
is the measure of how well the teacher has been able to present the content, contextualize the task, explain the task, and then give support of that task for the student.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. When as I read this chapter, like many times that we've just been here for 5 or 6 weeks, I'm so mad that I didn't have this construct to be able to talk about this when I was feeling some frustration, but didn't have a construct by which to kind of voice it, even as a teacher. When I was a science department chair, when they would introduce a new curriculum and they wouldn't give us any PD for it. It was a frustrating thing, but I didn't have a kind of a coherent framework by which to kind of describe that. That, look, you can't change one part of this core without changing the other two as well. And so, we got some of these rich textbooks and different resources and stuff, but because we didn't increase the teacher's knowledge and skill, it really didn't make an impact in the classroom, and that was really frustrating as a teacher. When I moved up to principal, it got frustrating that we sat in these meetings and I felt like it didn't affect anything that was going on in the classroom, and that's that kind of number 3. If you can't see it in the core, it's not there. And so, but I didn't have a voice for these frustrations, and I feel like this chapter kind of really gave me a voice I wish I had as I was going through my own career the last 15 years.
Yeah.
I do want to talk specifically about one part of the core that I'm struggling with, and I think it goes off of that first principle that really makes a pretty strong statement that increases in student learning occur only as a consequence of improvements in the level of content, teachers' knowledge and skill, and student engagement. And I think that's a great descriptor of the current core. But what it made me think about is if we imagined in the future what that core might look like. Where might some tangents be in the core, and what might that look like? And so I settled on this teacher part of the core, and I think about the availability of multiple creators of context for students, and I'm wondering if the teacher name for the future of the core might be a little limiting in terms of who the creators of those contexts might be. Give me your kind of thoughts on the core and as it relates to that kind of definition of teacher.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really neat perspective that you put forward. The idea that maybe in the future, which is the future is now, learning doesn't just happen in the presence of one teacher, right? You have all kinds of like computer-assisted learning and those kinds of things that seem to document that students can learn content without the presence of a teacher. Now, granted, this book is looking at like systems level change in the school building, so that's the context from which this core is designed. But if we are to anticipate how learning might be changed through technology-assisted ways, or even learning outside of the building altogether, then maybe the role is more like an instructional mediator, whatever that may be, rather than necessarily the classroom teacher as we kind of picture it in this triangle right now.
And yeah, I mean, I think that your suggestion, Matt, about how to adapt this for like a different model of schooling really like pulls out for me where the instructional core as a concept sits. It sits as in between a description of the state of things as they are and as a tool for like some prescriptive strategy, or prescriptions for strategy.
Right.
Like, let's look at how most kids are schooled in this country as it stands, and then if that's the model, then the instructional core points you in the direction of what you have to do in order to fix or to improve that. But you're actually saying, well, let's conceive of the future as markedly different.
Right. And you spoke to the task really being the center of that, and I know that I've seen kids do unbelievable tasks and unbelievable learning, sometimes, frankly, in spite of their teacher's knowledge and skills. And so, to what extent we can harness that, capture that in the new conception of the core, I think is something to kind of to think about, and it just be an interesting, what might the new core look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is also really interesting that, like, I don't think it's saying necessarily that the core is that you have to change all three in order to make any change. Although I know that's what it says here.
Yeah, that is very clear.
But I guess it's that the way that I put that into place in my mind was almost referencing back to the Cohen article about the difference between policy and practice, and that the instructional core and conceiving or like trying to think through the instructional core is the way that you mediate between the policy that a policymaker might put in place and its implementation on the ground. Not that policy has to prescribe what each element of the instructional core does, but that it has to give room and space and almost like push practitioners to consider the instructional core.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. I think that that it's not so. It's important that the three edges of the triangle are all present, but where the magic really happens is in the interaction between those three things, which actually does not happen at a policy level. It doesn't happen at a principal level or a central office level. It happens at a classroom level, and that's the beauty. So again, my question becomes: how do you prepare classroom level educators to really be able to describe and improve that kind of practice? And how do you train leaders in other places, whether it be school or building or district, to be able to support those kinds of thinkers?
Well, and I think also in a time of limited resources and with an understanding of a lack of human capital, to know that we're putting our money into creating rich contexts that students can engage with might not always be investing in a teacher as a person, but a teacher as a concept. And to that extent, I think we do need to kind of either just rename what that instructional core is, or at least expand our definition of what a teacher, a student, and what content are.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Thank you, leading or learning team, teaching team.
Yes, thank you.
Teaching and learning team.
See ya. See ya on Tuesday or Wednesday. When is it?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Bye. Do I hit escape?